I haven't got the exact dates at the moment because I would have to look something up, but I would say it would be around 1940. Then I started working in the East End of London. I worked for a firm called Paul, Paule. He was a self-made man, but a very charitable person. And because he had a good income, and the income in England, during the war, the personal income tax went up to 19 and sixpence in the pound. So he was very generous with his staff. He paid them because to him it was only, he was only paying them sixpence in the pound. He had I would imagine the largest retail shop in Wentworth Street. It was 26 Wentworth Street. And as I told you before, it was called Petticoat Lane. You must have heard of Petticoat Lane. And it was selling material uh, for making dresses and suits. He had two departments, one for suits, one for suiting material, and one for dressmaking. And it was very difficult to get, the main thing was to get supplies, because to sell was no problem. There was a big shortage of everything. And he had, having been established for some years, he had a very good supply. He also manufactured. Wartime, you just take it in your stride. Everything is normal, although it isn't. The rockets fell later in the war. You first had little bombs, which were not terribly effective. Effective, they fell on you, but we used to be in Anderson shelters. Then they had the DoodleBugs. You've heard of those? They were unmanned aircraft filled with explosives, and they would cha-cha-cha overhead. And if they stopped in front of you, you were in danger. If they stopped overhead, you didn't have to worry because they glided down. Anyhow, when these big rockets fell, I remember that we heard the rumor, what I thought was a rumor, that this, up to 400 people had been killed on the entrance of a tube station. But unfortunately it wasn't a rumor, it was the truth. The British have got a very good way of dealing with things like that. I remember going to work toward the end of, when the rockets were falling, and if you heard the rocket, you knew it had already fallen, and you were okay. You didn't worry about it. You just carried on. That was an amazing way of dealing with things. The bombing was mostly at night, not during the day. The rockets fell any time, but as I said before, once they fell, they fell. They were down, and it came to an end eventually. Still, you had to go to at the beginning, you went to the shelter during the night in order to be able to sleep. But gradually people stayed home and just took it. I remember once being I was at the youth, I lived in Lordship Park. I don't know whether you know the area. So we lived at the beginning of Lordship Park, and I was in the youth group, which met at the end of Lordship Park, at the bottom near Lordship Road, and a rocket fell. And I was absolutely certain, they said to us that the top of the road had gone, the top of Lordship Park had been destroyed, and I knew all my family was at home. So as far as I was concerned, I thought everybody had died. But actually it fell. There was in Green Lanes water reservoir, and it fell into the water reservoir. So it didn't cause any death. And I remember my father was all white. He was ill and he was in bed, and the ceiling had come down on him, all the powder, so he was completely white. But I was very glad to see him alive. I didn't expect it to be there anymore. That's one of the... on the other hand, at the beginning of the war, I remember, we were in an Anderson shelter, and when a bomb fell, you ducked automatically. And the Anderson shelters were only halfway buried in the earth, and then they were sort of, they had, what do you call it, a type of iron. And if you didn't duck, I remember once a bomb fell between the shelter I was in and the house, and they were very small, the bombs. So the shrapnel went into the Anderson shelter because was above the ground. But because we ducked automatically, it didn't hurt anybody. Only the people who were waiting in the hallway for the anti-aircraft guns to stop so they could run into the shelter. And it was just, as I said before, they took it normal. At least to me it was normal. That's the way you lived. You lived like that. You just carried on. Most people had their brothers and fathers in the army, and they were, fighting. But it was just, all this was accepted.